Welcome to the Life Stuff 101 podcast, dedicated to sharing stories and insights to inspire you to always make your mental and emotional wellness a top priority. We talk to people who share their personal journeys and experiences, as well as to people who share their professional expertise. And there'll also be other times when we share personal tips and stories, which will hopefully somehow spark that aha moment for you too. Because we all have those moments when we think, I wish I had known that earlier in life. That's what Life Stuff 101 is all about. Our discussion today is for general information purposes and not meant to be specific advice. For personalized support and specific answers to questions you may have, please consult the appropriate medical or mental health care professional. Now here's your host who's on this wild adventure ride of life just like you, and yes, a real life person who's actually slipped on a banana peel along the way. Mental wellness coach and psychotherapist Mio Yokoi.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Life Stuff 101. My name is Mio Yokoi, and it's my goal to inspire you to make your mental and emotional health and wellness one of your top priorities. When this episode is being released, at least where I am in Canada, it's winter. It's cold and it's dark, and many people living in this climate experience something called seasonal affective disorder, which is also known as seasonal affective depression, which is also referred to as SAD, which is a form of depression. I think there is still a lot that most of us can know more about when it comes to depression. There is a stigma around it, a ton of misconceptions, assumptions, and misunderstandings. And in this episode, you'll be listening to a conversation I had with mental health professional, advocate, and author Debbie Brady. Having more than 20 years experience working in the mental health field, Debbie has also had a relationship herself with chronic depression from a very young age. And she shares her story with us, what she's learned, and her goal to help others, including her family, with understanding and self-advocating when depression decides to pay a visit. Debbie has written a book called The Depression Survival Guide, Your Path to a Joy-Filled Life, where she goes more in depth into her experiences, but will also walk you through putting together a mental health toolkit, just like an emergency preparedness kit in case you need to break the glass to get some support when you need it. One thing though, before we begin, I spoke about some tech issues in a past episode, probably a bunch of episodes back now, but this episode that you'll be listening to, along with maybe a few other upcoming ones, do have some audio quality challenges to them. I apologize in advance, and hopefully it doesn't interfere too much with the quality of the conversations themselves. So whether you are someone who has experienced depression in the past, someone who's had depression visit more regularly, or someone who is more affected seasonally, or maybe you're curious to learn more about depression, I hope you'll enjoy my conversation with Debbie Brady. What I really enjoyed about your book is that while you discuss the serious nature of depression and the impacts it can have, you also bring yourself and a certain lightness to it, which I really enjoyed. And I also like to start these chats off with some lightness. And I was wondering if you can share a fun fact with us before we get into things.
I sure can. Yeah. I think one thing that a lot of people don't agree with me about, but I don't like the change of seasons. Summer is kind of what gives me my energy, both mentally and physically. So summer's just everything for me. I grew up in Philadelphia, went to college in the Poconos. I was a big snow skier, but I never really liked the winter. So now that I live in Florida, I almost wish I had done it 30 years ago because I am just so much more invigorated down here. And it just helps with my mood and my health and just everything, my mindset. So I don't look forward to the fall. I don't look forward to the winter. I don't look forward to the spring. I just want summer all year long. So,
And now you don't have to living in Florida.
nope. I know. It got a little cool here the other day. It was only like in the 60s in the morning. It was like, who ordered this cold weather?
But I bet by the evening or the afternoon,
Yeah,
it was probably
it was
it was
90.
just fine.
Yeah, it was 90. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess it's only through experience that you would really know until that point, until moving to Florida, that maybe you didn't have a sense of, it's like, well, this can actually be something that I could experience positively all year round.
Yeah, it was growing up, I just loved the summer. And I thought it was more because we spent our summers at the Jersey Shore, which I loved. So I thought maybe it was just my emotional attachment to that time. But then we moved from Philadelphia to Birmingham, Alabama, which is south, but we did still get some cold and winter there and a few snows every now and then. But what I noticed when I moved there was that my depression from the cold disappeared. I still had my regular depression, but not my seasonal depression, because if it was cold there, we did get snow, it didn't last. So maybe you had 2 days where it was too cold to go out, but then, by the end of the week, the kids were out in shorts again. And I just realized what a impact it had on my mood, the weather, and it just solidified what I had always thought, but I guess hadn't been brave enough to try out. So when life forced us to move there, I realized at that point, about a year or two into it, that I couldn't ever move back up north. I really needed to just keep heading south. So
And that's great. And even if it just happened because of like life circumstances and so forth, it's really great that that is the environment that you're in now. And you really know that that is something that is a positive impact for you.
yes.
So let's talk more about your book. It's the Depression Survival Guide.
Yes.
I found to be so relatable and an accessible discussion about depression, because sometimes I feel like depression is certainly a heavy thing.
Yes.
But it can also be discussed at times in a heavy way as well. And we won't have the time to really go into every part of it. And this is the reason why people should get the book, especially if it is something that people out there are struggling with depression or think, that someone who does. This book is available on Amazon. Depression Survival Guide is available on Amazon. Please go get it. It's something that I feel is really valuable to have. And it was a short read, but packed with actionable things, which also I enjoyed, and relatable. So it doesn't have a bunch of technical jargon too to have to wade through, which I think is great.
Yeah, I tried to avoid that because I tried to write it so that anybody could pick it up, whether they had a psychology background or not, and kind of understand it. Because most people who have depression don't have a psychology background,
Right.
So I wanted them to be able to just be able to pick it up and be able to use it and put it to practice and be like a guide. That's why it truly was meant to be a guide for someone. And that's why I have on my website, there's that free guide they can download and create their own survival guide with all their tips and resources in one place. So I wanted it to be just a tool for people to have so they're prepared for, when they have those struggles and when they have the time with their depression that comes.
So we'll definitely add that to the show notes, and I'll ask you about it at the end. And the thing that I actually really also appreciated about your book is the sense that I got that you think about your experiences with depression as a relationship of sorts. Can you share a little bit about your experiences and how you came to relate to depression as, I think in your book, you mentioned it as an unwanted visitor or a house guest?
Well, I think in the beginning, it was, I was kind of not accepting the fact that it was something that was going to keep coming back. I didn't realize I was kind of depressed as a child. I was very shy and withdrawn. But then I had a real big bout with deep depression when I was 18 and was anorexic. And I basically, once I got through that, thought that was it. But then it kept coming back. I had different episodes. And I thought, I think just it helped me to humanize it, to be able to figure out how I needed to cope with it. So kind of like if you have someone that comes over to visit, whether it's your mother-in-law or, whoever's like, oh, they're coming. And you have to deal with them while they're there. And you sometimes will do like certain things to make it easier. Like maybe you'll get, your favorite drink, or you'll exercise more, or you'll plan things, you do certain things to deal with that house guest that you don't really want. And so I started thinking of what do I need to do to deal with my depression more when it comes to visit, because it's going to come when I don't want it to come. Whoever wants it to be there, right? You don't ever want depression to come to visit. So by humanizing it, for me, it was able to let me be more concrete with it, because it's such an abstract for a lot of people, because we say mental health where, it's really our brain that's, ill at the time. So just by making it more concrete, it helped me kind of figure out what I needed to do and connect it as that concrete piece instead of this, abstract depression. So that's kind of what helped me figure out what I needed to do.
So,
to deal with it.
right. And before you actually maybe even were aware of the abstraction in some ways of depression, you mentioned that as a child, looking back, you had experienced depression as a child, but maybe didn't know to name it at the time.
Yes. I mean, I'm 51. So in the 70s, there wasn't talk of childhood depression. They didn't have school counselors who addressed kids who were withdrawn or shy. I was very painfully shy. I was always told I was shy. Where I was shy, but I was more withdrawn and insecure. And that withdrawn, I mean, I would just withdraw into my room and withdraw from my peers. And I would cry a lot. And I was just told I was oversensitive, but I wasn't, it was more that I was sad. I didn't have any reason to be sad. I had a great childhood. I had parents who loved me. We never wanted for anything. We weren't poor. I went to a great school. I didn't get bullied, but I was just always had this underlying feeling of sadness. Even when I was laughing with friends, I still just had this underlying feeling of sadness, but I didn't know what it was back then. So, and then after I started kind of learning about depression and even my own depression, reflecting on it, I realized that that's what it was. I was depressed as a child and then into my teens until I had the real bad bout at 18. So that's when I reflect back. I'm like, gosh, I was depressed, but that just wasn't something that people talked about back in the 70s and the 80s. We have so much more awareness for kids struggling now than we did then. So I think a lot of people think like, oh, we didn't used to have kids who were depressed. We did. We just didn't identify it as kids who were depressed. We were shy, we were withdrawn, we were weird. They had different terms for it, but we was still the same. So I think.
So when you mentioned that you had a serious bout of depression at the age of 18, is that when you were able to name it as depression?
I think I was able to name it as depression because it was told to me by a psychiatrist that I had a major depression, and I was anorexic too. So I dropped down to 84 pounds, and I'm 5'7". So I was pretty skinny, and it was just a big snowball. It all happened rather fast. I would say within a 6-month period. So yeah, it was just a very dark period. I just remember laying in my dorm bed, just praying that God would either get me help or just take me. I'm like, you've got to have something better for me planned, but I just didn't understand all that was going on and why I felt like that. And then when I finally got help and he said that I had depression, that was really the first time anyone had coined that term towards me and my feelings. So, and then that's kind of when I started really learning a little bit more about it.
How do you think at the time what it meant for you to have something to name?
I actually remember feeling relieved when I was sitting in the doctor's office when he told me. I actually felt relieved because I thought, that okay, this is something that we can deal with. This is something we can fix, because I wasn't sure if I was always going to feel that way, because it was deeper than anything I'd ever heard. It was so much more than just sadness. It was bad. So just to be able to have that and have that label really helped me feel, I guess, just having some answers.
I wondered too if it also felt as though it's like, oh, it's not just me to some degree. If there's a name for it, then there are all the other people that may be experiencing something similar as well.
Right, exactly. I felt, because at the time, I was at college and I was a freshman. So, what are you doing? You're going out, you're having fun. I was rooming with a woman who I met the summer semester when we started, and she's still one of my dearest friends to this day. And I really credit her almost for saving me during that time, because I didn't want to go to the cafeteria because it was cold. It was January. And I had no body fat. So she would skip meals and eat with me and in the dorm, and stay home sometimes from parties. So I wasn't alone, but I should have been out having fun. And I thought, what was wrong with me? Because in the summer I was out all the time having a great time. And all of a sudden I couldn't do that. So it was a relief to know that I wasn't the only one, and that there was a name to it, and that I could get through it or learn how to deal with it. So, but yeah, so it was hard because I was watching a lot of people having a lot of fun, and I couldn't understand why I didn't want to go out and have the fun that I did the semester before.
And in your experience, you mentioned the depression that you had been experiencing since you were a young child, but then there's also seasonal depression.
Mm-hmm.
The fun fact that you mentioned, that being in a climate where you have like summer all the way through the year, maybe you don't experience that seasonal depression anymore as part of your life. But how would you describe like what it was to have both at different times in your life?
Yeah, I know. I separate them. I do. I compartmentalize them because to me they are different because I'm not even sure I can put it in words, but they are different. But sometimes it would be worse in the winter because on top of maybe just some regular depression I was having either due to hormones or due to circumstance or whatever was triggering my depression, I also had the dark skies and the cold and I couldn't get out and get the sun. So it just kind of compounded it because one of the strategies I use is just getting outside and feeling the fresh air and getting in the sunshine. That really helps me. Taking walks outside, but I also don't like the cold. So I wouldn't be able to do that. So it would really just compound it because if I was feeling like I was getting depressed, I couldn't use that strategy. And then the seasonal affective depression would kick in too. And it would just be extra weight, extra weight. So
yeah, so that's what I was actually thinking about. It's just like if you would have the sadness and the depression as part of what happens for you, but then to have almost like an extra weight or just an additional depth or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's how you would describe it.
Yeah, just extra heavy on my chest. You just feel extra heavy. So kind of like if you get a cold, you have a bad cold and then all of a sudden you get a stomach virus too.
Oh,
And it's like, really? Like, you're already sick with one thing and you get something else and then you're dealing with two of these things. It's kind of like that. I had depression, then the seasonal. So it's like dealing with two illnesses at once.
right.
And it just takes an extra toll on you physically and mentally. So
I think this conversation that we're having, even about how differently we can experience depression, is important because I think that misconceptions when it comes to mental health that many people have, especially those perhaps outside the helping professions and so forth, but specifically I think around depression. What do you think are some of the big misunderstandings that are commonly related to depression and people who experience depression?
I think one of the biggest ones is that people expect people who are depressed to look depressed. Like they expect you to be in public, like I think with tears streaming down your face. You hear so often if somebody, dies by suicide, they're like, oh, I didn't even know. We get really good at hiding it. We get really good at putting on a mask because you have to find a way to go to work, to go to school. You have to work towards that. So, and you have people like Robin Williams who suffered from depression, but was always funny. So I think there's a misconception that people who are depressed look depressed or are always sad. And that's just not the case. I think another big one too, a lot of people think that if you're depressed, you're also suicidal. And that's just not always the case. In fact, I think I don't know the stats, but most people I know who suffer from depression have never been suicidal. I know there are some are, but it's not they don't go hand in hand. Just because you're in a big battle with depression doesn't mean you also want to die. So, and I think that the two are separate.
And the experience of depression isn't binary. I think that, so much of our like mental health we think of as like sick or not sick or anxious or not anxious or depressed or not depressed, as opposed to a spectrum.
Right.
How we experience things like depression, for instance.
Yeah,
right?
spectrum's great because you can have like just this mild underlying, like you just don't feel quite right. But you can do everything, and in fact, I just saw a graphic of it, and it's kind of like they broke it up into a green zone, a yellow zone, and a red zone. And like the green zone was like, you're functioning, you're doing what you need to do, but it's just kind of like this underlying nag. And then the yellow zone's like kind of struggling, but you can still get the necessities done. Like you can go to work, but you're not going to do much else, or you can pay your bills, but you're not going to do much else. And then the red zone is kind of like when you're really depressed. And I think that just did a real good idea of the spectrum. You can go from mild to severe in the same person, at different times, even different times of the day. You can cycle really, you can go through it really fast or it can linger. So that's why you never know. That's why I say it's like an unexpected house guest. You never know when it's going to come. You don't know how long it's going to stay. So
yeah, that's true. In your mind, do you think that because people can sometimes have these misconceptions, if you're depressed, you look depressed, or if you're depressed, you're suicidal, do you think that can sometimes have people not want potentially explore their depression, or if they are experiencing depression, they may not want to acknowledge it?
Yeah, I think a lot of people hesitate to acknowledge it. I think it's still seen by a lot of individuals in a lot of places in society as a weakness, or, kind of like there's still that, oh, you just need to suck it up and move through it or get over it. And it's just not. You wouldn't tell someone with the flu to suck it up and get over it. So I think a lot of people are afraid to acknowledge they struggle with it. And what I have found is the more I have shared over the years, I mean, even going back, into my 20s, I would just share with people, and I just kept finding more and more people. I find the more you share, the more you find others who either struggle themselves or have a family member who struggle with depression. And I think that people are just afraid still of what others would think, or what their employer might think, or their friends might think, and they just want to try to ignore it and pretend it's not there. And that doesn't really get you anywhere.
I like that you mentioned, like, the more that you talk about it, the more that other people can relate, and other people can maybe get to a point of wondering if that's something that's true for them, or to also be able to come out and talk about their experiences. And one of the things that I really liked in your book is how you mentioned the importance of self-advocacy, which is something I feel very strongly about as well. Why do you think it's important for us to self-advocate, especially when it comes to our mental health and experiences with depression?
Oh, well, self-advocating is so important because no one else is going to fight for you like you're going to fight for you. Unless you're a kid, then no one's going to fight for you like your mom's going to fight for you. And plus, we're the ones who know what we need. We know what we need. We know what's going to work. So someone can come and try to say, oh, you need to do X, Y, and Z. But if you know X and Y don't work for you, then you're just going to waste your time. So you need to speak up and say, I've already tried X and Y and that doesn't help me. Can we come up with a different plan? So if you don't speak out about your needs and advocate for what you need, the system will often not give it to you, whether that's a school system, mental health system, the physical health system. We've got to speak up and tell our providers, what we are in need of. And we're the only ones who can do that the most, because we know what we need. We know how we're feeling. And I just think no one's going to fight for you like you are. So the stronger that you get with that, and the more confident you get about what you need, the better advocate you'll be for yourself. And I just think it's important to empower others. And that's one thing I try to do. I try to empower others, sometimes just by leading by example, and say it's okay. You need to speak out and speak about your needs and let others know what you need, because no one else is going to speak up for you.
I think that's such a really key piece around self-advocacy, because I think that there is a need for that individual to know how to self-advocate, or what to self-advocate for, even, right? Because
Right.
we can talk about how certainly that we're going to fight for ourselves the most, as you mentioned, as adults, right?
Right.
And we have the agency to do so. But sometimes we don't have the information.
Right.
Or sometimes we don't know how, or even to understand what we're self-advocating for.
Right.
I think that's one of the reasons why your book is, and your discussions around depression is so important, so that we learn, that people can learn how to self-advocate, or what to self-advocate for.
Right, because the more knowledge you have, the better off you're going to be with that. So it's our responsibility in a lot of ways to, take our time to educate ourselves on whatever our struggles are. So about depression, so about techniques to try, so what you can have available to you. And my oldest son, he suffers with anxiety, and he went off his medication 2 years ago. Just, his doctor suggested it. But just this past summer, I was so proud of him. He self-advocated, and he said, you know what, I feel like my anger is getting bad again, because that's how his anxiety will show itself. And a lot of times depression shows itself in anger too. And he went to the doctor and he told him and got back on his medication. So that was one of my main goals as a parent, is to teach my boys how to self-advocate, because I think I'm not going to always be there for them. So I wanted them to make sure they had that skill. So I think it's
and
important.
the self-awareness.
Yes, exactly.
That clearly he had noticed something within himself, where he was like, okay, like something is going on here, and to perhaps check it out with you, or the people in his life, and then B, to then go ahead and self-advocate.
Exactly.
It's really great. And what I really like about the way you discuss experiencing depression is that it just doesn't have to happen to you. I mean, certainly, like, for those of us who do experience depression or have experienced depression throughout our lifetimes, that it could be challenging, but there are ways of managing. And having a plan can help weather those bouts of depression. But even also to be able to keep things more manageable. But can you take us through the idea of plan, prepare, and persist?
Yeah, I kind of thought of that when I was writing. I thought, you know what, if you come up with a plan, so you have to figure out like what's going to help me, what helps me already. Like I had things I know help me. I know the weather helps me. I know eating healthy helps me. Exercise is a big one for me. Just different things that are going to help you. Having your tribe, your people who you can call, in the middle of the night. And if you don't have anybody you can call, getting connected to community resources, just having those resources there, and then preparing by, having them. I think it's important to have them written down, which is why I made the guide. Because if we have it when we're depressed and we aren't thinking straight all the time, so you may not be able to remember what works for you. You may think, oh, I'll remember to eat this, or I'll remember that taking a walk will help me, or I'll remember to watch this show. But when you're depressed, you don't always remember. So that's why I think it's important to prepare and have some of those resources available, whether it's, keeping certain foods in stock, or one thing I love to do is to color. That kind of gives me some kind of peace. So I always have some coloring books and color pencils. And then just, to persist. It's like, okay, I'm going to get through this. You've gotten through it before. We're going to get through it again. It just may not be as fast as you want it to be. So we just have to figure out a way to learn whatever works for you, to just keep pushing through until you start seeing a break in that heavy depression, or seeing the cracks and the light coming back into your life. And sometimes that means going to your doctor, going to your therapist. If you take medication, maybe you need an adjustment. Keep it. That's all the resources you need to plan for, keeping their numbers, knowing who to call. Because there's a lot that goes to it. It's not just, oh, you're depressed, take a pill, move on. You really need to be a comprehensive plan, in my opinion, to not only get through it, but to prevent it and keep it away longer, and then to get through it when it's there.
And it's true, yeah, at least, here in Canada, when there are stats, I think in North America, where there's like over, this is just off the top of my head, and I know I'm completely off on this, but it's actually a large percentage of people who visit their primary care provider or their general GPs, that it's generally due to stress or some kind of like mental health issue.
Mm-hmm.
And often, though, the treatment that's proposed is just medication, like take this and go.
Right.
And so if they also had alongside maybe that particular protocol, but also what you're talking about, the plan, prepare, and persist, medical professionals or helping professionals, whomever it may be, to be able to work with people just to say, it's not just take a pill, you figure it out, but here is a way of thinking about your mental health. Here's a way of thinking about your depression that can help you when you're feeling this way.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times your regular primary care doctors, a lot of them don't have a lot of psych background. They did a rotation in medical school or whatever, but it wasn't their focus. They don't even have a ton of that information. And then I know here in America, a lot of our insurance coverage for mental health is just non-existent or very little. So a lot of people can't afford to go to a therapist where they might be able to learn some of these skills. And that's one reason why I want to try to share my story, so I can help those people. Maybe you can get to your primary care physician to get the medication you need because you have health insurance, and they can apply, they can prescribe an antidepressant, but that's about all they're going to do. And maybe you don't have the $200 every other week to see a therapist or whatever it is. But you need more than just that pill. And I think that's where our self-advocacy comes into. We need to learn to kind of find those resources and tips that help us and figure that out. But sometimes you need a guide. Some people don't know how to search for that. So
Can you take us through how plan, prepare, and persist came about for you?
I don't even think it was like a conscious thing. It was more as I was writing the book, I'm like, well, wait, I kind of plan what I have a plan in place. And then I prepare for that plan by preparing, like writing down knowing what works for me, knowing the food that helps me, knowing the activities that help me, and also just having those resources at home. Like I said, the coloring books, or certain TV shows I know that help me. So I think I just was like, oh, wait a minute, I kind of plan and prepare, and I always push through. I'm 51. I always get to the other side of the depression. It's not fun when I'm in it, but if you just keep persisting, you're going to get through it. Everybody, you do. So it just may not seem like you are. So I just think it's so important for people to understand that even when you're in the darkest of depths and you just feel like there's no end in sight, just hang on and reach out for, and we also have to, everyone says, oh, reach out for help, but sometimes we can't reach out for help. That's why it's important for other people to be aware of the signs of depression, so we can reach out to our loved ones if they drop off, or, aren't, answering our texts like they usually do, or phone calls. So it's just important, I think, just to, like I said, to know your plan, prepare by having those resources, and just know that it's going to take time to work through it, but you will get through it each time.
And what's valuable about that too is that often when people are feeling depressed or down, sad, any number of those kinds of mood experiences, that often people will say, let me know how I can help. And without having something like a plan, or to have something in place where you're prepare, and persist, you sometimes don't even know how to ask for help, or what that even means, right? That actually takes extra like brain energy to figure out. It's like, I'm not exactly sure. Like, I know how I'm feeling,
Right.
But I don't know how you friend or family member specifically can help me. But having something like this in place will at least have maybe more of an opportunity to know how to ask for help, or what to ask for help around.
And one thing I suggest with the guide is to, make copies of it and give it to like 2 or 3 of your closest supports, so they know. So they know what to do. So they know how to help you. They can just pick it up and look through it and maybe come up with an idea. Maybe it's just, oh, let me see what oh, you have a favorite TV show that makes you laugh. Let's watch that. And you can sit there with a healthy snack and watch a comedy with them and just be with there. And then you don't have to think, oh, what are some things that might help my friend? So that's why I suggest, making copies of the plan. If you fill out the guide and hand it to people who are those people who come to you in those time of needs, so they know what to do.
And have the trusted people in your
Right.
life that, yeah. And I think about in your book, you talk about the mental health toolkit, and I like. And it's such a great idea, because why wouldn't we have a first aid kit
Right.
for mental health, right?
Right.
And you've talked a little bit about your own mental health toolkit. Can you take us through a little bit more of that, and perhaps, if you can share more about the idea of a mental health toolkit, and maybe even expand a little bit, if you're open to it, about your own.
Sure. Yeah. This was a term. I mean, I think I've always kind of had one in a way, but this was a term I kind of came across about a year ago or so through different blogs or Facebook groups that I follow. And I thought, oh, that's just a really good term and good idea. So I started thinking about, like, what are the things that I kind of keep in my pocket, so to speak. And I have one of the stress balls, so I always have one of those stress balls that you can kind of squeeze, because sometimes if you're upset, that helps me. I have essential oils that I use, that I diffuse supposed to help depression. I try to always have healthy snacks in the house. Fruit, I'm a big fruit lover, so I always try to have some fresh fruit. Mints, always, because I need something in my mouth for some reason. So, and it just helps if I have it. I have, playlists with certain songs that lift me up, not depressing songs, but lifting up songs that make your, heart feel happy, or your mind feel happy, and make you kind of want to dance if you don't feel like dancing. And I have, certain shows that I like to watch that make me laugh. The Office is always one that just I can go to and makes me laugh. Or comedians, I love to watch like some stand-up comedians. And when I'm really desperate, I'll just smell some sunscreen, because it makes me think of the beach.
That's awesome.
I mean, that's so crazy, but
no, but it's so powerful.
It is, the sense of smell. Yeah. So the beach is my happy place. So I'll just sniff some sunscreen if I have to. And so I try to use all the senses, and just kind of keep some, and, coloring book and colored pencils. That's something I can do if I don't feel like doing anything else. And that kind of just relaxes me.
That's interesting. To actually appeal, like within maybe your mental health toolkit, to all of your senses, like different
Hmm.
different things that you can do to stimulate the different senses. I think that is really a really good way of looking at that too.
Well, and people, I think that depression and mental health is like just a brain issue, like up in your head, but it really affects your whole body. It affects uh, your internal, your external, your body, everything. It just really affects everything. So I think the more society starts to learn about it, the more we realize that it's really a whole body experience that needs to be
Hmm.
addressed. So, and if you're not eating right, you have to feed your body to feed your brain. So,
I look at the human being as a system, right? Like
hmm,
everything is a feedback loop.
right.
And it's an interesting thing that culturally, like, we're beginning to change how we think about ourselves as beings. But it's been so fascinating that, especially around mental health, that often it is sort of like, it feels like this isolated thing that people kind of conceptualize as depression is a thing, and you either have it or don't have it, and you can take it away, or or have it in you, or whatever it is. But that in fact it's actually a part of a system, like
Yeah,
that you're, whatever you're experiencing is part of everything else, is part of your human being system.
exactly. Exactly. It's all connected.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually wanted to ask you, speaking about the census just a few moments ago, about the essential oils that you mentioned. And
Hmm.
I'm sure that there are some essential oils that are specified for certain things, but maybe some of them are personal as well. Do you mind sharing what you are that are go-tos for you?
Yeah, the two that I have found that have worked for me, and then another son. I have another son who has high functioning autism, which kind of comes with some depression. The two that we have found that have really helped us both are bergamot. I think that's how you say it. BER. I'm not a good speller.
It's like citrusy, I think, right?
Yeah, and then peppermint. They're the two that really help me. And lavender helps with kind of to relax you, but the peppermint and the bergamot together is what I'll put them in together into a diffuser and let them go. And those that really helps me.
I would imagine that there is some sort of an invigoration or a bit of energy that
Hmm.
comes from those two scents. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what you need because you feel like doing nothing. So if it can kind of invigorate you a little, maybe you at least feel good enough to go get something healthy to eat. It's just the little steps that maybe, and then if you feel good enough and you eat something healthy, then maybe you feel well enough to get a shower. It can start to snowball as you do one little thing at a time. So you kind of start small with what you can handle. And then as you're feeling a little better, baby step to something else. And before you know it, you're coming out of it.
In addition to figuring out these little things for ourselves to make our way out, having trusted support, like supportive, trusted people, because not everybody,
No.
I don't believe it should be that person for everybody anyway. But I believe it's so crucial. And when it comes to having a mental health toolkit, how would you describe the role of having the support of trusted others?
I think you need to know who those people are, which can be sometimes hard for those of us with depression to decipher because I think we can be a little trusting. Um, but so it's sometimes there's some heartbreak in that, but you need to figure out who they are, and that's why I have a spot in the guide for you to write down who those people are, so you know who those go-to people are that you can call or text or message or email somebody you can reach out to that they will be responsive to you when you need them. So
Yeah, and one of the things, it's true in figuring out who those people are, um, can definitely at times be a challenge. And even though they could be family members or friends, sometimes they can still care and love you, but then they can also still say things like, "Why are you depressed?"
right.
Or people can get really prescriptive about, like, "Oh, you should be doing this or that." Can you talk about why these kinds of responses are often not helpful?
Well, yeah, I mean, we know we don't know why. Sometimes we don't know why we're depressed. Why are you depressed? Why do you have the flu? I don't, I don't know. It just sometimes it just hits you, right? You don't have everyone. I think that's another misconception. People think if you're depressed, then there's a specific reason. And sometimes when you have chronic depression, there doesn't have to be a reason. There's a difference between situational depression and chronic depression. You break up with a boyfriend, you may be depressed for a month or whatever, but then you get all over it and maybe you're never depressed again. Where if you have chronic depression, it can just wake up one day and it's just there and you don't even know why. It just hits you. So asking somebody, why are you depressed? They don't know, most likely, right? And I
And that's another
think,
thing too, that there are different types of depression, or like
hmm
what may cause depression, or why people may be depressed. And that's something that we often, like, that most people don't know either. And like you mentioned, like, why are you depressed? If it's someone who experiences chronic depression, that could be a really tough and loaded question to be asked. But also, when many of us, most people don't know that there are different kinds of depression, it could be very shaming
right.
to have those questions asked.
And I think as a society, we want to fix everything, and we want a quick fix, and we want answers quickly, concrete answers, and there's just always not that. So there may not be a concrete thing that this person can do. Sometimes you just have to ride it out with your supports, and I think that leads to frustration to sometimes people who don't understand it, who are trying to support us, that they don't understand that maybe you just need to be there for them, and there's not anything really you can do except just to be there so they know they're not alone. There may not be an answer to all your questions, and by saying, oh, have you tried this, have you tried that, that's probably not the time to to do that. Instead, ask them, instead of saying, have you tried, ask, what have you tried in the past that has helped you? Is there something that maybe I can help you with? Or, would you like me to make you something healthy to eat? Would you like to watch a TV show? Kind of give suggestions instead of saying, what do you need? Because
Right.
they may not know what they need.
And also, this is just subjectively coming from me, to ask whether somebody is open to a
Yes.
suggestion.
Yes, exactly. Are you open to suggestions? Because they might be,
Yeah.
or they might not.
And they might not be. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And often, like, relationally, it could get challenging at times, because somebody could be trying to help and they're being, like, really, suggestive about a lot of things. And if there doesn't seem to be openness to it, then people can sometimes take offense to that or get frustrated or whatever. And that could become this relational difficulty, interpersonal difficulty,
Right.
that could be more difficult for the person who's experiencing the depression.
Because that's just another stressor to put on them. Because then they
Hmm.
feel like a burden. Because, oh, this person got upset with me because I couldn't answer the questions. So,
It's so true. So I'm really thankful, Debbie, for your time today, and I think that just being able to talk about depression in these ways, again, like, without sort of the jargon and without sort of, like, the technicalities, and we talk about experiences, I think is such an important thing for us to be doing. And I have a couple more
hmm
questions for you before we wrap up for today. I hope that's okay.
yep.
And so, one of the things that I like to ask everybody that I speak to on this podcast, apart from your book, what would you say are maybe a go-to book or resources that you would recommend for people?
I always refer people to NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. I don't know, I assume they have it in Canada, but I know in the States it's a nationwide organization, and it's NAMI. They have one at almost every city. So that's a good place to start as far as finding local resources. They have groups, they have meetings every month. So I always like to refer people to NAMI, because they can refer you to every resource that's in the area that you live. So I always think that's a great one. And another online resource I like, that I have a lot of short articles and just a lot of resources, is The Mighty. There's themighty.com, and they're on Facebook, and then they have different sections you can kind of sign up for. So there's one for The Mighty on depression, so you can get like emails with different articles or follow them. And it has a lot of personal experiences of people, and then some professionals that come on, and I just have found that to be a really good resource for education for people. Those are probably my
Is
two top ones.
I feel like I've heard of Mighty, but I'm not familiar with it. Is it specifically in relation to mental health?
They have a few other things. They have the Mighty for fibromyalgia, but it's not just for mental health, but they have the Mighty for depression, the Mighty for anxiety. They cover a whole mental health on the Mighty, is what the one is called that I follow. So it's kind of I guess it's a website, also a Facebook page, and they share different stories, but then they have it broken down into specific sections of different, like, mental health and different health situations. So if they follow mental health on the Mighty, that's where they would get. And then there's depression on the Mighty, anxiety on the Mighty, which kind of focuses on those issues. And a lot of people share their own experiences, or, like I said, professionals will share resources or some of the latest research. I've just found it to be very helpful. And they're not real long articles. Like I said, I like to keep things short, just because if you struggle with depression or anxiety or anything, you start reading something that's too long, you're going to get lost. So,
Yeah. So it sounds like it's not only resources and information based. There's also maybe a community aspect of it as well.
Yeah, there is a community aspect. You can go on the website and they have people can comment. So yeah, definitely. And there's one here. It says 16 songs you might not know are about mental illness. So they have things like that you don't even think about. Um, another one, how noise affects me during my depression. So different things like that. They have a lot of good articles like that, and then like tips that help other people, and then people share their own experiences. I've just found it to be a really good resource.
That's really great. And last question for you. What would you say is something that would have been good to have known earlier, kind of a life lesson?
I wish I had known earlier. I wish when I had my really bad bout of depression when I was 18, I wish the doctor had told me that this could be a lifelong kind of challenge, because through my 20s, I became very frustrated as my depression would come back. I didn't understand why it kept coming back. So it took me probably till close to 30 to realize this wasn't something that was just a one-time passing. So I wish I had known earlier that this was, that it was possible to live with depression and still have a successful life, but I was going to need to really learn how to deal with it in order to be successful. I think I wasted a lot of time thinking I was just got to push through it instead of building up those resources and supports and techniques that I now have. So I wish I had known that earlier. I think that's something I've tried to do with my sons that have inherited some of my genetics. From a very young age, I've tried to teach them to self-advocate, to know what helps them, to know what their resources are, because that's something I wish I had known a long time ago.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that that is in some ways still a narrative that exists around depression. It's like, let's get rid of it.
Right.
Especially when we're talking about chronic depression. Some of us, it's an experience that come and go in our lives, and that it doesn't define who we are, but it's certainly a part of who we are. And rather than to think about it as like something that you can get rid of, and that if you can't get rid of it, then there's something that you're not doing enough of or something like that.
Exactly. I have a family member who has Crohn's, like it's a chronic disease, and he can go years without any kind of, in flare up or anything, but then it happens, but he knows what to do to, make it go longer in between flare ups. He knows what he has to eat and what he has to do and medicine he has to take and all that. It's the same thing with the depression, but we just don't always think that way in the society. Like if you have chronic depression, there are things you can do in between those episodes to maybe spread it out or make them not as bad next time. And I just think it's all connected with health, exercise, what you eat, all of it. It's all about the whole body and keeping it healthy. And I think it just really helps the mind too.
And doing those things can certainly support an individual, but if there is a tendency toward chronic depression, that sometimes the depression will happen.
Right.
Like it could be, anything. And so there are ways of minimizing maybe the depth and the impact. But I think that it is such an important conversation to have, that it's that we can be doing our best. We can be like, perfect all we want, but then sometimes we're still going to experience those things. But it's not.
And you can be on medication
failing.
and still get depressed. I take Cymbalta, and I can still get depressed. It's just that it helps lessen it and it helps shorten it.
Yes.
So people think, oh, well, I take medication and I see a therapist. So why am I still depressed? I'm failing. It has nothing to do with you failing. It's just what happens.
And if we could, imagine if we can change the conversation around that.
And that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for doing that great work. Your book is a depression survival guide. It could be found at Amazon. It could be ordered over Amazon. Where else can people find it?
They can go to my website, theendingStigmaTogether.com, and there's a link on my website under the book tab that they can link right to Amazon.
And that's where people can find more about you as well?
Yes. There's a whole info page, and I have a bunch of articles, blog posts I've written there. I try to post twice a week, but the last couple of weeks I haven't. I had my own little episode of depression that my medication got messed up. So I had about 2 or 3 weeks that I was kind of off kilter, but I'm getting back to the swing of things this week. So, but there's some good information on there if people want to check it out, read it. And I'm always open for suggestions. And they can find me on Facebook too under the same name, Ending Stigma Together. And I try to go live once a week. So,
that's great. You're doing a lot of great work. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This has been such a pleasure and such an honor.
I hope our conversation today either provided you with some insights about depression and how depression can have many faces. And also, if you have your own experiences with mental health challenges, perhaps you'll consider putting together your own mental health toolkit. As Debbie mentioned, you can find free resources on her website at endingstigmatogether.com, and you can purchase her book, The Depression Survival Guide, on Amazon. All these links are available in the show notes for this episode. Thank you for joining me today. If you're new here, welcome, and please subscribe in your favorite podcast app to be notified of future episodes. And a special thank you to those of you who have been joining me on this weekly adventure. And if you like what you hear, I'd really appreciate it if you can leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This podcast is a labor of love, and so far I'm amazed that it's very much like the little engine that could. The number of people listening are growing every week. I'm so grateful for every single one of you listening. On that note, do take kind care wherever you are in the world, and I look forward to speaking to you again real soon.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Life Stuff 101. If you haven't already, please subscribe so that you'll be among the first to be notified when new episodes are released. Always be sure to check out lifestuff101.com for show notes and to be a member of Mio's Miracle Mob. Because as the wise modern-day philosopher John Bon Jovi once said, miracles happen every day. Change your perception of what a miracle is, and you'll see them all around you.